Hello, everyone. Royce Eddings here, and I want to thank you all for joining me on my YouTube channel, Royce in the House. And tonight we're going to be talking about brothers Eddie and Alex Van Halen and how they endured a horrifying racist environment before becoming rock icons. It's a hell of a story, believe me. Okay, music fans around the world, of course, are still grieving the loss of Eddie Van Halen, who died October 6, 2020 from throat cancer. Actually, prior to the throat cancer, Eddie had had tongue cancer, and a third of his tongue had been removed. And they thought it was probably the cigarette smoking again. Eddie was kind of a chain smoker. But Eddie's opinion on that was he always had a metal pick. And the metal pick was oftentimes, between his lips, touching his tongue. And that was the same side of the tongue that a third of the whole tongue was removed. So he always thought it had to do with the metal pick. Anyway, the Van Halens were the sons of Dutch immigrants and spent their childhood in the Netherlands. His former bandmate, David Lee Roth, their former bandmate, David Lee Roth, in an interview, just explained the painful experience the young Van Halen brothers had growing up. Roth described how the Van Halen's parents were treated because of their mixed race relationship, how badly they were treated. He added the brothers were often referred to as half-breed in the Netherlands and met with difficult circumstances even after immigrating to the good old USA. Okay. When they arrived in America in the early 60s, they didn't speak English as a first language. Their mother, Eugenia, and their father, Jean, Jan, Jean, who was a traveling musician, had met in Indonesia when it was still under Dutch rule. Excuse me, let me catch my breath here a little bit. I think I need to slow down. They met in Indonesia when it was still under Dutch rule. Okay. So shortly after World War II, the couple decided to move back to the Netherlands, where Jean was from. And this is where the rock stars were born. Of course, Alex first, he was 3 years older than Eddie. Okay. Their mother, Eugenia, was treated as a second-class citizen. Eddie Van Halen said in an interview, the family packed up and left for the USA in 1962, making the trek by boat for 9 days before settling in the Pasadena area. Okay. And the early days in the U.S. were very difficult. The family lived in a house shared with two other families. And it was actually in a neighborhood where they had some relatives that had previously moved to the USA. Well, his mother worked as a maid. His father, an amazing musician, picked up a job as a janitor, okay? And he maintained his musical career. Jean Van Halen was an accomplished saxophonist, clarinetist. I've watched several videos of him playing not only the guitar, but the ukulele. There's even a video out there circulating where Jean is tapping while he's playing the guitar, something that the two-hand tapping Eddie made famous. So I thought that was fascinating when I came across that. Okay, so the environment at the time wasn't particularly inviting to young immigrants. And Eddie described this first day of school as absolutely frightening. They already went through that in Holland, the first day, first grade. Now you're in a whole new country where you can't speak the language. Now, this is Eddie talking, and you know absolutely nothing about anything. And it was beyond frightening. He said, I don't even know how to explain it, but I think it made us stronger because we had to be. Okay, so the school they attended at the time was still segregated, and that because they couldn't speak the language, they were considered minorities. Imagine that. My first friends in America, says Eddie, were black. Eddie said in an interview it was actually the white people that were the bullies, okay? They would tear up my homework and papers. They would force me to eat playground sand, force me to eat playground sand, all those things. Well, the black kids were sticking up for him and even getting in fights to protect him and his brother Alex from the white bullies. Okay, they came here with approximately $50 and a piano, not able to speak the language, going through everything to get where they are. If that's not the American dream, Eddie said, I don't know what is. I mean, I love that attitude. If that's not the American dream, I don't know what is. Almost brings a tear to my eye. He said in an interview, Indonesian social media users have paid tribute to Halen, who's seen as a source of pride in the community because they're half Indonesian. Okay, when the kids chanted racially charged nursery rhymes, Chinese, Japanese, etc., 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 at my bro and my mom told us about the Van Halen brothers who were Indonesian and Dutch to make us feel proud about our heritage. Uh, both brothers took piano lessons at an early age, and both became accomplished pianists. In fact, Eddie won some awards as a pianist in his early years. The influence of the piano clearly became the foundation of the future careers of the Van Halen brothers. Okay. Of course, Dad was an amazing musician. Like I said, look up Jan, Jan Van Halen guitar playing. You'll be blown away. I'm telling you, you've got to do that. So Eddie Van Halen, generally considered to be second only to Jimi Hendrix as one of the most influential and talented rock guitarists of the 20th century. Okay, Alex Van Halen, the older brother of Eddie, co-founder and drummer of the hard rock band named Van Halen. Although Alex never reached the stardom of his brother Eddie, Alex is generally considered to have been a major contributor to the Van Halen band's success over the years. Okay, and then came the British invasion in the 60s. Yeah, the British invasion. I lived that in real time. The Beatles became a big hit when I was in the 6th grade. Okay, and all through junior high and early high school, the British invasion was pretty much dominating the airways. Okay, so in the 60s, the Van Halen brothers were mesmerized by the British invasion. They abandoned their piano and began playing drums and guitar. Initially, Alex was the guitar player and Eddie was playing drums. However, shortly thereafter, Eddie had been practicing guitar, real steadily all along there. The brothers switched instruments, a wise move because Alex became a better drummer than Eddie. However, Eddie's prowess as a rock guitarist is legendary history. And one little story I heard a couple of years ago was that Eddie was the drummer at the time, and Alex was a guitar player. Eddie walked in and he heard Alex playing the drums, and he was playing "Wipeout" by the Chantays. And Eddie said, "Man, we've got to switch. You're a much better drummer than I was," and that was the truth. Okay, so some of the brothers' early bands, and I love this. First one in particular, the Trojan Rubber Company, one of their first bands. Genesis, the Space Brothers. In 1972, the brothers formed the Mammoth Band with Mark Stone on bass. 2 years later, 1974, Mark Stone was replaced by Michael Anthony, the one we all remember, in all the songs and all the videos. He was brought in to replace Stone. David Lee Roth became the lead vocalist. Also, the band's name was changed to Van Halen. The name it retains today. As a musician, Alex sort of lived in the shadow of his famous brother, but Alex is and is recognized as an outstanding musician in his own right. His powerful, dynamic double drumming style is as unique and instantly recognizable as Eddie's guitar sound. Alex has been a recipient of numerous accolades and awards. Is considered to be one of the eminent percussionists in rock and roll, all of rock and roll music. Alex's only solo performance as a musician can be found in the instrumental song "Respect the Wind." The instrumental was used in the movie Twister, the tornado movie. Both brothers performed in the movie. Eddie on the guitar, of course, and Alex actually performed on the piano. But each one had a solo piece in the instrumental. The instrumental was nominated for a Grammy Award in '97, but it didn't win it. Okay, Eddie's first spouse, actress, entertainer Valerie Bertinelli, ran into each other, interestingly enough, at a Van Halen concert. Valerie wasn't a big fan. She was there with her brother Patrick, but she caught Eddie backstage tuning his guitar and said it was all-consuming, instant adoration. I took a gander at him, and that was it. Alex was married to Kelly Van Halen. The couple had one son named Ari, a typical Dutch name. In 1996, Alex and Kelly were divorced, and apparently Alex has remarried since then. And Eddie and Valerie had also divorced. Okay, so Eddie was quite an innovator. His father was also an inventor and made some prosthetics for himself. He had cut all his fingers off in an accident, and it kind of makes it a little hard to play the clarinet and the other instruments that way. Okay, so Eddie played originally a 1958 Fender Stratocaster, but he wanted a heavier piece of wood for the body of the guitar. So he bought a Strat-shaped body for $50, a neck for $80. The Strat-shaped body came pre-routed for 3 single-coil pickups. Of course, he went to work on that with the chisel, soldering irons, so he could install humbuckers. He chiseled out the pickup holes. He potted it himself, the pots, and reducing the feedback by dipping them in a coffee can full of paraffin wax. I mean, he was really an innovative guy. Also, to his preference, he removed the varnish from the neck. Usually it makes it, slipperier. You can move up and down the neck faster. And after removing the varnish, the neck was wider, thinner. He refretted it with larger fret wire and crazy glue. He then sprayed it black and white with acrylic lacquer Schwinn bicycle paint. This is a great story, just the guitar alone. In 1972, while attending Pasadena College, Eddie and his brother formed a band called Genesis. Incidentally, back to the guitar for a minute. That's why it was named Frankenstrat, just like Frankenstein, put together from many parts. Okay. Anyway, 1972, while attending Pasadena College, Eddie and his brother Alex formed a band originally called Genesis. The band changed its name to Mammoth when Eddie became aware of an English progressive rock band by the same name, Mammoth. He changed the name once again to They changed the name once again, Van Halen. And that was because David Lee Roth said that he couldn't find a better name for the band. Okay. So the band at this point was Van Halen, Eddie and Alex Van Halen, Mark Stone, and David Lee Roth. His service, David Lee Roth, the Van Halens didn't own a PA system, okay? And every time they performed, they had to rent a PA system. David Lee Roth was performing in another band, singing the vocals, and Van Halen became frustrated with singing his own vocals and decided they could save money by hiring David Lee Roth, who had a PA system, so they would no longer have to rent a PA system for every performance. So anyway, in the mid-'70s, they landed steady gigs at various Southern California locales, high schools, massive parties, and clubs such as Gazzari's, Starwood, playing a mix of original and eclectic covers. They played ZZ Top, Aerosmith, Slade, Stevie Wonder. The group became a fiery live act and learned how to be entertainers. These free-spirited concerts went a long way to explain why Van Halen's future success. They made the band versatile. In 1966 and 67, they opened for Sparks, the Ramones, and UFO. And that allowed Eddie to discover his strengths, okay? When he started playing clubs, he had to play the top 40 songs. And for the life of me, I could never make anything sound the way it was supposed to sound. He told the Associated Press, I could never emulate other people's playing, a blessing in disguise. Always wanted his own sound. Okay, so in 1977, Van Halen's hooked up with Gene Simmons after the Kiss artist watched them live. Simmons delivered a 10-melody demo tape for the Van Halens before the advancement of their self-titled debut collection in 1978. The band trusted working with Gene Simmons. He trusted that they would help them get their break in the business. At the end of the day, it didn't demonstrate productivity. In the midst of all that, Simmons tried to get them to change their name to Daddy Longlegs for some unexplained reason. Anyway, the quick version, Simmons couldn't land a record deal for the Van Halen, so they headed out in a different direction and additionally shrewdly kept the name Van Halen. Okay, so Van Halen was signed by Warner Brothers in 1977 and released their debut album in 1978. Their 1978 self-titled, excuse me, debut album, Van Halen, was released to much fanfare, influencing many musicians in hard rock. The two brothers are the only members of Van Halen band that have endured the entire duration. Eddie Van Halen was also determined to manifest his own unique sound. He regularly deconstructed and refashioned instruments and gear. There's a reason his black and white and red Strat, as I mentioned earlier, was known as Frankenstrat. When he started playing clubs, he had to, had to do the top 40 thing, which they did not like. So anyway, this is a video that I wanted to just discuss just the early years. Okay. I will be doing a future video on, their albums, their hit songs, and the backstories there. I'll be doing a future video. So if you like what you see here, go to my channel, Royce in the House on YouTube. Please subscribe. Doesn't cost a penny. It never does, but it helps the channel to grow and sustains us. Okay. So subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when the new shows are coming on. I do these podcasts every Sunday, but I do intermittent things during the week. I do a live podcast on Sunday, always music-based. We've covered all kinds of great stuff. I know you're going to enjoy it. So anyway, I really appreciate you all joining and all watching. And that's what's going on in Royce's world today. Thank you all very much for joining me.